Hello and welcome everyone. Before we formally begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose ancestral lands the UTS City campus now stands. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders both past, present and emerging, and would like to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of the land. My name is Gabby and I will be your MC for this session. I'm a very proud UTS alumni. I graduated from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences in 2016. I'm now working at the Australian Human Rights Commission, and I'm also a founding committee member of the UTS Young Alumni Committee. If you haven't already heard of us, look us up on socials so you can keep up with our latest events. But enough about me. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon for an exciting In Conversation session with Emma Watkins as part of the UTS Aluminated webinar series. The series celebrates the achievements of our most outstanding graduates who have been recognised as recipients of the 2020 UTS Alumni Awards. A very warm welcome to our participants, their guests, and the UTS alumni joining us. Before we begin, I'll just mention some general housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the UTS website in the coming days. We will share the link with you by email soon. We will have a 30-minute discussion with Emma, and then we'll turn to you guys, the audience, for any questions. Please feel free to shoot any questions throughout the session to the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We will try our best to get through as many as possible, but we do apologize in advance if we don't get the chance to ask your question. I would now like to invite Dr. Gregory Ferris, Senior Lecturer of the Media Arts and Production Program, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at UTS, to join us and introduce our very special guest for this afternoon.
Thanks, Gabby. I would also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land UTS sits on, a site where teaching, learning and the telling of stories extends back tens of thousands of years before UTS, before our previous incarnation as the Institute of Technology, and before that with the Mechanics School of the Arts in the 19th century. It's hard to know where to start with our young alumni winner this year, but dead set legend is not a bad way. I had the pleasure of teaching Emma in the early part of this decade in what I would like to call simpler times. Initially as an undergrad student, then for her MA in Media Arts and her capstone project, the short film Re Hear See, that incorporated elements of montage, dance, and sign language, elements that we can still see in Emma's work practice today. Re Hear See went on to win the award for Best Experimental Film at the 2013 Golden Eye Awards against some very tough competition. It's also hard to think of a better winner for this year's award, especially when you align Emma's career with our faculty's graduate attributes. Arts and Social Sciences has 6 attributes that apply not just to my area of media arts and production, but across the whole faculty. And it's easy to see these parallels during this afternoon's conversation. The attributes are professional readiness, critical and creative inquiry, international and intercultural engagement, Indigenous competencies, active citizenship, and effective communication, of all of which Emma has in spades. Emma, in her career and as a person, also aligns with much of UTS's 2027 vision, notably in regards to lifetime learning. For example, her Masters by Research, completed in 2018, through to her current high degree research entitled Creative Sign Language, Dance and Film Editing, a series of tests in formal integration, where she's also being supervised by another dead set legend and media arts alumni, Dr. Karen Perlman. Anyway, enough of this fanboy stuff. It's now over to Gabby and Emma, and congratulations, Emma, and huzzah!
Huzzah!
Thank you, Greg, for the warm introduction. We look forward to seeing you again later in the discussion. Hi, Emma.
Hello, thanks for having me. I loved that intro by Greg.
Always great.
I'm back.
He'll be back with us shortly. It's so great to be speaking to you today. First of all, a massive congratulations. You are indeed the 2020 Young Alumni Award winner. With everything you've achieved to date, is this where you thought you would be when you first started your career?
Gosh, no, I I think that's what's so bizarre about this whole cycle of events. I grew up as a dancer and injured myself at school and decided to teach myself how to film edit in art class. And it really was something that sprung from there. And I've always been interested in film ever since, and so interested in dance on film. And now here we are. I would never have expected this.
It's like the perfect merge between the two.
Yeah, and it wasn't an easy kind of road here. It was always very separate, and lots of people that I had spoken to along the pathway had always tried to keep dance and then the film very separate. And I do want to say thank you so much to Greg Ferris, who really was such a leader in pushing me and encouraging me to continue to study this particular area. Um, yes, I did this film at UTS Rehearsey ages ago, which included dance and sign language on film, but have made so many different works since and have improved, hopefully. And so, working towards more insight and critical thinking into this area in particular.
You mentioned there a few challenges that you faced separating the two. What would you say, besides that, have been the other main challenges that you faced in your career in media and entertainment in general?
That's a really good question. I think, media is so prominent at the moment, especially when everybody is at home during this pandemic. It's becoming a very real way of interaction between people. We're now getting so used to these kinds of digital platforms and ways of interacting with each other. It's amazing. Even when I was studying with Greg Ferris, this kind of technology wasn't even part of normal day life. And so essentially, yeah, we're on film, we're using film, and it's kind of real-time editing, and it's amazing to be able to incorporate this and to connect with people, not just in our own country, but in countries all over the world, which has made media more accessible. It's really exciting. I just think we're just at the beginning of it now.
And it seems to get to where you are, you took a few risks. What can you tell our audience about taking risks?
Oh, so many risks. I really have always loved dancing, and I grew up dancing since I was 4, and I was so ingrained in that, and nothing was ever outside that world. I just loved being in dance class and using my body for expression and learning how to do that in different styles of dance. And when I was injured at school, it was like the whole world was crashing down. And through that art class where I learned how to use Final Cut Pro was probably the most exciting 3 months of my life. I just became really obsessed with editing. And I don't really know why, but I just loved the way that I could create something using visual media that felt really tactile, even though it was on the computer. I completed this film in year 11, and at the time, I went to performing arts school, which also was devastating because all I wanted to do was dance. And as I kind of finished the HSC, I had finished this particular film and had submitted it to a film festival, and I ended up winning Best Editing, which I would never have thought would be a thing for me. But at the time, when I just was a very hands-on manual kind of art person, I edited every single frame. I didn't even know how to mask things, and I don't know what I was doing, but I really wanted to, look at every frame and color every single frame of my film. I mean, you would just
time.
I wouldn't do that now, but I learnt so much from it. And after I finished school, I was offered a full scholarship to Sydney Film School. And at that point, it was a real issue because everybody else that was part of my upbringing really wanted to know that I was going to study full-time dance. And so I think that was a really scary moment. I trained for 15 years. And everyone was like, right, so what dance company are you auditioning for? What country are you going to? And that was never really it never really happened. So I went to film school and did a very intense practical year at Sydney Film School, you know, really getting hands-on as part of crew teams, and tried all different roles, and naturally fell into producing and editing. Just my kind of brain. I do like to organize things, and then maybe that triples over into editing and just trying to sort all that out. But one thing that I loved at Sydney Film School was we were able to edit on actual film. And so we were splicing real 16mm film, 35mm film, and sticking it together. And I think from that experience, like at that moment, I was like, right, I just love this. I love everything about this. And a year later, I ended up feeling separated from my dance roots. I ended up doing full-time dance at a full-time dance institution in Sydney called 85 International. And so I'd done a full year of film, a full year of dance, and I was like, just really want to marry both of them together. So I had been accepted into UTS after school, but didn't go because I had this scholarship. And so, yeah, I just was kind of throwing all eggs out of the basket. And at that time, it was really difficult for me to decide where I wanted to go. And I tried to find a place that would support both my dance and film interests. And so I enrolled in the UTS Media Arts and Production course, which was highly exciting when I first joined, and had Professor Gregory Ferris as my main film tutor and mentor and supervisor. And as I plodded along in the Bachelor, I realized that I really just wanted to focus my work. And we actually put together an application to apply for the Masters, and I got in. And it was a very, my path of learning was actually quite bizarre. I'd done this, I'd done that, and then I came here, and then actually I ended up changing course and then going into the Masters. And the Masters was, that's really how things started to evolve. But really before that, even within the Bachelor, there was a very firm understanding that film was one thing and dance was another. And I really wanted to showcase elements of my dance experience on film. And yeah, Greg just encouraged me so much. And I really started to make my first kind of works within the Master's course.
Looks like there's a lot of love there for Greg.
Like what a legend. I mean, I haven't even really had a chance to catch up with Greg because we've been so busy in, you know, each respective lives of continuing learning and studying, and of course Greg teaching, and then me touring. I haven't seen him. So this is great.
And speaking of, we all see you dancing a lot on screen. I guess, how have you found that you've integrated the skills and knowledge that you learnt along the way in your media arts production course into your work with the Wiggles and also with your advocacy work?
I think a bit like my time at UTS, where I finally got to blend both of my passions. I was very fortunate to, I don't know the right word, but I was fortunate to not win a role here at the Wiggles, but I was accepted to be a fairy. And I was very honored to be a ballet dancing fairy when I first started here at the Wiggles in the Dorothy the Dinosaur show. And so firstly, I was employed to dance ballet. And then as things went on, I started filming behind the scenes footage and loved taking pictures. And I hadn't actually met Anthony Wiggle, the Blue Wiggle, for a few months. I was working for the company before I'd met any Wiggles. And I happened to be doing a chaperoning meet and greet event with Dorothy the Dinosaur. And I was passing Anthony in the corridor. And as he was approaching me, I was like, oh, I can't talk. I'm really having heart palpitations. Like, okay, Anthony Wiggle's walking towards me. What am I going to say? What am I going to say? And we kind of met in the corridor backstage at Brisbane Entertainment Centre, and he's like, "Oh, you're from the Dorothy the Dinosaur show, and oh, you did you make that film, or you edited that film?" And he'd pointed out a film that we had made, behind the scenes footage of one of the Dorothy the Dinosaur tours. And at that point, I didn't know if I was going to be in trouble for making the film or if it was a good thing. And I had to kind of make a decision whether I was going to own up to it. And I don't know why, but I just went along with it, and I was like, yeah, I did. But I thought, well, I better tell him, because I didn't want him to, to wonder who made the video. And he's like, it's great. It's really good. Great skills. And then that was it. The following year, I got asked to join the Wiggles on tour as a Wiggly dancer and to film all the content for their video channel at the time, and come along the road with the original lineup of the Wiggles, Greg, Murray, Jeff, and Anthony, and film content for the website and for YouTube and try new things. And for me, it was just, what an amazing chance that I could have to be a dancer on the road and perform, supporting the original lineup and also using my skills. And ever since that day, really, I have been involved as a Wiggle, the yellow Wiggle, and I'm very passionate about the way that our content is put together and is edited and is distributed. And I just love being part of that world and how we create the content here. And look, I'm so thrilled to be able to do both.
You've also played a really important part in making the whole show more inclusive. The work you're doing with the deaf community is absolutely amazing, and you seem to be very passionate about supporting children within the deaf community. Do you mind telling us why that's important to you and what your current focus in the space is?
Sure. I think the Wiggles feel a great responsibility to providing accessibility and inclusivity for children of all different backgrounds and all different abilities. And so that's something that is definitely a big part of the philosophy of the company, for sure. And in a way, it lined up so nicely with my background growing up with some deaf friends. I had a beautiful friend at school, and both of her brothers were deaf. And I was always interested in the way that they were communicating with their sister, who is hearing. And I remember playing games with them and, pointing to different objects in the house and, what's this? Oh, what's this? And they would show me signs for different household objects. It wasn't really much more than that, but I just fell in love with the expressive element of Auslan, which is Australian Sign Language. And really, at the same time that I met Greg Ferris, I started enrolling in community courses to learn Auslan. But because I was touring so much, I never had a chance to actually finish any of my certificates in Auslan, which was really, I've just felt so upset. So I still kept connections with my friends within the deaf community, but I never was really able to confirm my study. And so this year, I'm really happy to say that I finally have finished certificate 4 in Auslan, and I'm now in diploma. So it's a very special space to be able to study with other students online, which is amazing, twice a week in a diploma of Auslan, where expression and communication is the biggest part of that learning. And so I have decided to continue my study in that area to enrich my understanding of sign language and the deaf community for my PhD currently.
And how did you go about integrating Auslan Sign Language into your work with the Wiggles? How did that, I know there was a whole show that you did in sign language. How did that go about? How did that happen?
There's been different facets of how we've tried to include sign language, and I can definitely say that over time it has improved, but it really is something that we're continuing to work on in terms of full accessibility, and that's really important. I can recognize that when we first started, we might have signed sections, but it wouldn't create full accessibility for a full show or a full DVD. And that is something that I've really learned to understand, and how important that is, not just for children that might have a hearing loss, but for their family and any other members of the family that aren't able to access English as a spoken language. So the beautiful thing about Auslan in terms of its expression, it lends itself so well to the way that we use gesture and mime and dance, specifically in the Wiggles. Some certain elements of the original Wiggle songs, like Rockabye Your Bear, are all about matching words to actions. And so that idea of matching those elements actually help children concrete those particular ideas and have a sense of connectivity, whether the language is spoken to them or whether they can see it. So I've really been reflecting a lot on some of the original Wiggles choreography or movement as such. And a lot of their choreography back then was really just the four guys getting together and working out how were they best going to express or illustrate those particular concepts or words to a child, because 3 out of the 4 Wiggles back then had actually completed their training and study in early childhood development. And so that is what is so amazing about the first incarnation of the Wiggles.
And I understand you're also involved with an Indigenous Sign Language initiative. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Yeah, I see you excited there. Yeah.
There's actually quite a lot of exciting projects. Last year, I happened to stumble across a few articles about the Yolngu Sign Language community the Yolngu community working together to create a pictorial dictionary to illustrate how many different signs that they actually use in their community. And these signs are used every day for hunting, for communication, for interaction. And sign language and gesture is such a big part of their way of life that they felt that it would be very important to document in a big illustrated encyclopedia all the different kinds of signs that they have been using for tens of thousands of years. And I happened to read a few articles about this, and there was a project or a fundraiser called Save Yolngu Sign Language. And I thought, that's really interesting. I've actually never heard of that particular sign language. Mind you, that was actually a very naive perspective, because I didn't realize that there were so many different types of Indigenous sign language, like Indigenous language or Indigenous spoken language. So then that opened up a whole nother world, and I got very excited about the prospect of learning. I was actually thinking I was going to purchase the book and start learning the sign language myself for my own study. But then I just got flogged with emails about this particular inquiry. And I happened to find out about an amazing researcher and professor, Dr. Bentley James, who's a linguist, and he'd been living up in that community for about 25 years. And with the original elder of the Yolngu community, was actually putting together this book for quite some many years. Unfortunately, she's passed away. And so the book was actually never finished. And the fundraiser was established to raise funds to actually get the book printed. So I contacted Bentley James and said, let's talk about this project. This is amazing. This is an Indigenous language of this country. How amazing that we have a chance to be able to share this with other people, because they were already willing to share it. And how wonderful that we could actually learn a sign language that is Indigenous here. I just got so excited. And then Bentley and I have been sharing stories about each other's studies, and I have basically tried to help fund some of their book printing. But this feels like quite a long time ago now. It's about a year since, or maybe over a year since, I got in contact with Bentley. And he called me last week out of the blue, saying that the book is printed and it's in the mail, it's on the way. And oh goodness, I'm so thrilled that they were able to complete this pictorial dictionary to share with libraries across Australia and hopefully overseas. So let's let's see how beautiful these pictures are going to be. I've seen some sneak peeks. And it also has a matching website where the sign isn't actually static. What's so interesting about sign language is that it is kinetic and it's moving and it's visual in a 3D space. So it's not just a picture where it's a symbol. Depending on the location and movement and hand shape and orientation of that particular movement renders the sign correct or actually renders that sign complete. And so on the website, they have actually moving GIFs that show how the sign should be signed, and you can see it in real life. It's amazing.
That's the beauty of technology using.
Exactly.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. I'm excited to look that up too now, especially given that it's been printed.
Yeah.
Congrats with that. I see you. Yeah, we did a little crash course on Auslan, and I can see you putting there.
Yay! Well, look, it's lovely that finally with technology, as we have been talking about, that these opportunities and this amazing creative art can be shared with people across the world that may not have even heard of Auslan or the Yolngu Sign Language or any sign languages for that fact. Visual and visual communication, FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, allows for us to connect with people visually. And so that is what I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, it'll be such an amazing piece of history as well to be able to look back on that. Before we move on to our final questions, I just wanted to remind the audience, if you do have any questions you want to ask Emma, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So make sure you pop them into the Q&A box there. I'll be reading them after the final few questions. Reflecting back on all the amazing work that you've done and everything that you've achieved, what would you say that you did during your studies or as a young alumna that helped you get to where you are today? Is there any advice you would give current students or recent graduates?
That's a good one. I really think for me it was about instinct, that I really knew that that's what I really wanted to combine film and dance together. And even though a lot of people said no, a lot of people like, no, that's not going to work or that's not important. I think some of that instinct does take shape as soon as you're able to materialize some of your own work. Sometimes it's really, about preparing some of your ideas and actually creating it, and practical based research for me is always my favorite option. So I actually obviously, as lots of people at university are reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and reading, and obviously reading is important, but I love being able to read and then apply something that I've read and make it in a film to test whether that is beneficial or not, and actually see for myself if that's a good way to work. Most of my study that Greg had introduced before my current study really has become a series of tests on creative integration of sign language and dance and gesture and film editing, but it's taken a real twist. It's taken a turn of perspective because I am a hearing member of the community investigating something about the deaf community, and that is very challenging, and I have to be very sensitive in this particular area. And so I encourage people to be very open-minded and always to be very sensitive so that cultural appropriation isn't happening. It really is an amazing change of events in my study, and it's a really important part about how we as hearing people can be more mindful when investigating these kinds of art mediums and actually being there to support it rather than take over.
Well, it seems that going with your instinct worked very well for you.
I mean, it was good, but I did realize, particularly over the last 5 years, I now know things that I would not do again. I've learned the lessons the hard way, and I've realized that the more learning that you can do about your area of study, the better, and to be involving people that are highly involved in those communities.
Along the way as well, yeah. And finally, before we do open up the discussion with the audience, what would you say is your fondest memory of UTS?
Well, I mean, it would really have to be learning from Greg Ferris. But my fond memory of that university truly is my connection and true encouragement from somebody who believed in my projects, which I found to be profound at that time because I felt a lot of barriers studying, and so I'm very, very grateful.
Thank you, Emma, for all those insights. We'll now open it up and read a few questions. As I mentioned earlier, we'll do our best to, I have a few here, we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. The first one, my question for Emma for the session is, how have you been looking after yourself during this pandemic and lockdown, and are you okay?
Oh, that's very sweet. I think that seems to be a question that keeps reoccurring for lots of people. You know, it's nice that people are able to check up on people at this time when that human interaction has been changed a lot, where everything is on Zoom. I feel like the whole day can be on Zoom sometimes. But thankfully, we have this kind of technology to keep interacting with each other and to look after each other. So I very much appreciate that. I feel that with the Wiggles, we felt really responsible to try and continue connecting with our audiences whilst we haven't been allowed to tour. And so those restrictions for us have changed our workplace. We're so used to traveling around the world and around Australia for 80% of the year. So about 8 to 9 months we travel, and we've been doing that for almost 30 years, and in my generation for the last 10. So it's become a really normal way of working, traveling, seeing people, meeting people, whereas now all of this is online. But if we're able to change the way that technology can interact with people so that that community engagement is heightened, then I think that's what we need to start looking towards.
Has it been nice to be home a little bit more often, not so much on the road?
And that part has been actually quite nice. And I think it's been a great time for reflection of ourselves as individuals and a reflection of the business, and, you know, really assessing, you know, how can we connect with people? You know, one thing that we did find, sorry, I'm jumping everywhere. One thing that we did find was, you know, as real people, we can only tour to so many places within one calendar year. But by providing online concerts through Facebook Live or Instagram Live or YouTube Live or Zoom Live, we're able to reach families in countries that we wouldn't ever be able to go to within one calendar year. So that actually is really exciting.
And do you think, in saying that, this whole pandemic and having to stay at home and having to use different technologies to connect with people will change the way the Wiggles continues to perform from here on in?
I think it has to change for everyone. Everyone has to flexibly try and pivot the way that we connect with people. But it's opened up so many avenues to connect with people in other countries and have meetings with people that normally we would actually go and visit them physically. Whereas now we seem to be able to connect with people on a more productive level. So that is exciting. But for the children who are so used to coming to see us live in concert, I do hope that, you know, sometime in the near future we're able to continue that, because our true love of performing live is something that is a very, very special moment.
Another question we have here, what advice would you give yourself now, reflecting back to when you first were asked to be the next Yellow Wiggle and the enormity of your new career achievement?
Well, some people may know that singing is not my forte. It's also something that scares me quite a lot. And I think growing up as a dancer, and maybe that's why I felt inclined to learn so much about sign language, I just loved movement. I loved dancing. I loved expression in terms of using my body. But when singing came into the picture, that was actually very scary for me. And when I first joined, I joined as a ballet dancer, so I never thought that I would have to use my voice. And then Anthony would encourage me to narrate parts of the show, and I always thought it was weird. You know, I just thought, why do I have to use a microphone? I don't know what this is. And then when he asked me to be the new Wiggle, I was really thrilled, but I said, I can't sing. And so that was really a barrier for me. And I can listen to my voice on, earlier albums, and I can tell that I'm really stressed, and I can tell that I'm thinking about myself. And so what I learned through Simon Wiggle, who's the red Wiggle, and Lockie Wiggle, who's the purple Wiggle, they had a huge upbringing and training within musical theatre. And they encouraged me to think about the audience. And then as soon as we were able to think about the song being a story for the children, then all of that went away. It was only really when I had a chance to do the Emma TV show on my own that I really had to let all of that go and just focus on the children. Once I was able to do that, I was able to relax. And then I think then that made everyone else more relaxed. So I would say to myself, just relax, Emma. Why were you so worried?
Just enjoy the show.
Relax, Emma.
Another question here. With all of your amazing talents, what do you see yourself doing in 10 years?
Oh, well, I did make a pact with Jeff Wiggle, the original Purple Wiggle, because he wiggled till he was 60.
Oh, wow.
So I said to him, that is a goal. And I feel fortunate, like I said earlier, that I'm able to do both things that I love, which is dance and film. So, I would hope that we could continue to wiggle for another 10 years. That would be amazing. And, hopefully I finish my PhD and I really hope that we'll be able to assist other people that are researching in that field, to look at some of the things that I learned and some of the things that I did wrong, and to build upon that school of thought for future research.
And how do you maintain your amazing energy and positivity? It is contagious. Yes, it is.
I guess, traveling and being on the road, being on the tour can be really tiring. Tiredness is certainly a part of everyone's life, particularly now. But I was diagnosed with endometriosis in 2018, and I think from that moment was a real wake-up call for me to assess my own health and my own workflow and workload. And at that point, I was like, right, what do I need to change? Because clearly my body is not loving it. So I changed a lot of my diet, tried to support it with good fats that would help my brain actually stay alert. And that's really been something that I've tried to change over the last year, and have been reading more into that. And I have so much more energy now. And I think that particular kind of diet has actually helped me study. It seems weird, but I think before I was really distracted, whereas now I can see the benefit in actually looking after my body. And being a dancer, it's really important that you're always looking after your body as your main instrument. I think people forget that. And the older you get, the more sore you are. So you really have to look after yourself. It was a self-assessment since 2018, which was probably late, which I'm very happy to acknowledge that I was late to the self-awareness party. But we got there.
You might need to share some Emma tips. Here's another one. It must feel really special to be so loved and celebrated by so many young children, particularly so many young girls. Do you have any female role models who you look up to?
Okay, well, going back to before, actually, I think, all the Wiggles feel a sense of duty that we're role models to children around the world. You do feel that, children are looking up to you and are learning from you, or learning through the things that we are producing, whether that's music or dance, and that's really important. I do have to say that we are so fortunate that children are our audience, because they're so beautiful. They're so nice, but they're really honest. Like, if they don't like the song,
I was going to say they're also the toughest critics.
So, to meet children on the street or in the shopping centre, at the grocery store, or whatever, children are actually always really happy to see you. They might not recognise you, especially dressed like this. I'm not very popular. But if I was in my outfit or in yellow and a child did recognise me, there's definitely always a sense of excitement. So we're very lucky to have children as our audience. But for me, role models, I guess you feel like you have role models in different areas or different fields, or I feel like I pick from lots of different people. I really love that attribute, or that character trait is something that I can learn from. I met an amazing woman last year through a work that I had been asked to be involved with for Sydney Festival. And I was asked to come on board a project that was to encourage accessibility and accessibility really, through performance and through drama and through singing and through sign. And at that stage, I was pretty worried because I really wanted the project to be supported by the deaf community of sign languages going to be part of it. And I didn't realize that they had already contacted this amazing woman called Susie Wright. And she is a deaf artist. She is a deaf advocate. She is the most expressive person I have ever met. And since I met her last year, my whole world has changed. I can't express, even though I say that word way too much, I can't illustrate how much I have learned from her in terms of body expression and just self-expression. She was born deaf and grew up actually not signing. It wasn't really encouraged, and she learned orally and spoke English and, attempted to basically work through life with her family. And I think at the age of 15, she really started to sign properly, a little bit earlier than that. I just can't think of how, or that mode of like that kind of journey for her. And now when we converse, I just learn so much about how she expresses herself through her body and through movement. It's quite unbelievable. She's one of the most amazing expressive artists I've ever met, and I'm just so happy that I got to meet her. But she works at the MCA and is an amazing art teacher and takes tours of the museum in Auslan. And look, I encourage anybody to check out her work. She's an artist. She's amazing. And I really feel that I've felt a real connection with her, and particularly at this time during my study, I've realized how important it is to be that connected with your instinct in terms of your own expression through your body. And I credit that to her. I have a lot more to learn from her, by the way. A lot. She's amazing.
But it really is such a beautiful form of expression using your body, and being able to do that is such a gift as well.
And it is important to recognise Auslan is its own unique language, and it doesn't have the recognition that it should. Lots of people ask about, why isn't there a universal sign language? And, there's lots of different discussions about that. But we're so lucky here in Australia that we actually have our own sign language and our own Indigenous sign languages. It's something that we should be able to promote more and to encourage in, early curriculum. But something that I learned from Sue was the way that Auslan, being a visual language, is so flexible, and the way it can be expressed from one person to another can be very different. And being open-minded in terms of expression can really change the way that you communicate with other people and what they might get from that spontaneous exchange. And she encouraged me to, let my boundaries go a bit and be a lot more artistic about the way that I communicate.
But as is with any new language that you learn, it can be, you can say something, pronounce something, with one letter off, and it means something completely different. Same as with Auslan, you can do a slight sort of movement wrong, and all of a sudden it means something completely different. And people don't realize that it's not very different to learning another language, except that you're not speaking, you're expressing yourself.
Something that is really important to know about Auslan is that there's so much culture as part of that particular language. And so the way that the signs are acted or performed or engaged actually have a lot of context or cultural identity around it. And that is something that I didn't realize before. And that is what I am learning to be better at recognizing.
We have another question here. My 3-year-old son has been loving the songs from the Hot Potato Studio, and especially the new songs, to help them understand social distancing, etc. How do you think you will be engaging with the children going forward?
Exactly. It's a great question. We really tried to be very responsive and very nimble at the time of the pandemic. And when we did find out, we had performed one show. We had 2 shows. It was the first day of the tour in Sydney. And by the end of the second show, everything was in lockdown. So our tour was cancelled. So since that time in March, we've cancelled every single show since, which has been very devastating. But because we did try and change the way that we interact with people and do performance through an online platform, I do hope that we're able to produce content that's really beneficial for children and families and carers and parents, so that we can actually support children, not just with our live shows, but with the content that we're producing for different platforms. So my hope is that we'll be able to produce content that is across multiple platforms. We are on multiple platforms currently, and the Wiggles are distributed very heavily in Australia and New Zealand. But it's definitely about connecting with some of our other families and fans overseas too, that now with technology, because the world is becoming so much more global, we have the opportunity now to use the technology to that advantage.
And the next question is probably my favorite. My 3-year-old daughter would like to ask, why isn't Emma wearing yellow? Why is she wearing black?
I'm so sorry. I'm looking around to see if I have anything yellow. I do have something yellow. Hang on a minute. It's a very good question, and this is what I mean. If I color association is such a big part of the Wiggles and the Wiggles brand, and children do recognize us instantly when we're dressing our colors. So I apologize that I wasn't wearing yellow before. But this is my wiggly paint smock, which I have just found from the prop box that's with me currently. And that is all the yellow I have to offer.
There's Emma Wiggle.
Usually I do wear my wiggly outfit more than my own pajamas, and it's very comfortable, and I'm very used to wearing it, and it does feel very much a part of me.
That's so sweet. Someone else has asked, as a young professional and a person who started their art career so young, it seems that in life there is no room for mistakes. Can you walk us through a mistake you've made and what you've learned from it?
Oh, that's so good. I mean, yeah, I've done it all. I've made so many mistakes. I do remember I wear glasses. I need to wear glasses. I can't see things that are far away. I won't ever forget this particular mistake where at film school we had to choose a crew role out of a hat. And at the time, I thought that was fun. And as I was about to choose the crew role out, I thought to myself, I really don't want to be on camera because I don't feel that that's my strength. And of course, I picked out camera operator. That's natural, isn't it? So I was part of a big crew. There was about 20 of us, but we were learning film camera for the first time. So 16mm film, it's very expensive. We only had 10 minutes in the can. I was placed with the camera on a dolly platform, and somebody had to wheel me from here to there. And the problem with those cameras, though they're amazing, you have to push your eye into the viewfinder quite a lot to be able to see it. It won't open unless there's enough pressure. But then, not like an automatic camera where you can adjust settings and see what it looks like before you take a picture. The DOP, the director of photography, has to decide what kind of lens is on it, what kind of ND filters are in front of it to make sure that you're not overexposing the film. So when you put the ND filters in front of a lens, it's like sunglasses for the lens, and it gets darker and darker and darker and darker and darker. And we happen to be shooting a very difficult object, which is a car, and it's difficult because it has lots of reflections. And we were filming a car on a road. And as I was looking, we asked to get the boom to come in to check the frame. I could see the boom. It looked, yep, got it. I told, yep, go up. Yep, I can see it. It's in the edge of frame. Yep, that's it. Okay, it was up. Fine. Started. Okay, action, rolling, clap a loader. Like so many people, which we just don't shoot film like this now. But it was a great test in terms of, you know, what was at stake. It was so expensive to film this, you know, this footage, even though it was a test for school. And I, you know, everyone asked me, can I see everything? Fine, it's absolutely fine. Filmed the whole thing, 10 minutes done, filmed all the scenes. We got the rushes processed and we came back, and as a class, we got to watch the rushes together. And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, oh, I just hope it's in focus. Like that's all I care about. Like, cause I worry, I'm anxious about my own eyesight. So I'm sitting there watching we see the clapper and then it goes out, and then you start to see this like furry thing at the bottom of the screen. And I'm like, what is that? And then everyone's like, oh, boom, boom. So we're in this class watching the footage. Everyone's like, boom, yelling at the screen. Then the boom, it doesn't come in just the tip of the frame. It just comes in the full frame like that. And because the boom and the microphone was black and it was against a black car on a black road, I never saw that. And so I wasted a very expensive roll of film and wasted everyone's time in the class, 60 people sitting there watching the screen. And I did have to own up and admit that I was the camera operator at that time.
And what was the outcome? That it is what it is.
It is what it is. I'm very embarrassed. But if I was working on an actual feature film, that would have been really bad. I would have lost my job. So I'm glad it happened at school, but it was very stressful. I knew how expensive it was, and I wasted everyone's time.
Oh, goodness. That's a pretty good story.
I can laugh now, but it wasn't funny at the time. I was very stressed.
It sounds quite stressful, especially having viewed it back, knowing that you were the one that made the mistake. No one else is responsible. That is where accountability starts. Like, that was my role. That was the one thing I had to do. I checked the frame and then just let the boom ride right in the middle of the frame and not see it. Kudos to you for saying it was a mistake.
It was a disaster.
We've got two final questions. Looking back to your studies at UTS, how did you manage to find the time for your dance practice alongside your study? And how did you stay on top of this balance between your creative love and university?
I think it is hard. And I think as the world changes and becomes more modern and people become more multifaceted, people are going to take on more and more things. It's not as simple as just going to uni anymore. People are having to support themselves and work a full-time job and study full-time or part-time and work casually and work 7 different things. And I think that's a real stress of modern life. It's becoming worse, I think. For me at that time, I wasn't touring as much as I am now. But in saying that, I really did love what I was learning. And so I felt that I always made time to do it. And I still feel that now. I feel like learning sign language for me is so interesting. I love it so much that it doesn't matter how busy the day is. I still make it to the class. even though it's online. But the fact that it is online makes study so much easier for everybody now. Like at the time, it really wasn't an option for me to do it via correspondence. And I'm sorry, Greg, I am mentioning you again, but Greg did actually support my choice to work in that particular role, because at that time I'd only just joined with the Wiggles and I didn't know what future it had for me. And so for people to actually let me continue to do the touring at that time was a big risk. You know, I was even working as a dance teacher, and even the dance school were very supportive. They were like, yeah, go, we'll cover your classes. Whereas I was at another dance school and they weren't so supportive. So it really just depends on the people. But, you know, thank you to the people that did have some foresight that allowed me to, you know, be a bit more lenient with my schedule so that I could, you know, continue to do all those different elements at the same time. So yeah, thank you.
This is a lovely one to end on. It goes back to your love for sign language at the moment. Andy Dexter, I might have pronounced that wrong, recently performed on The Voice Australia and used Auslan to perform his song. He said that he had his own voice in signing. Do you have your own Auslan voice?
It's a good question. And it's also, this particular topic is really taboo at the moment. And it is really important to recognize that this particular journey of Andy, who is a very dear friend of mine, has such a beautiful heart, and he loves expression. And unfortunately, some of the perspective of his particular, you know, way of art or way of expression wasn't actually received that well. And so there's a huge and a major polar kind of perspective of this particular situation. I definitely feel that my identity is very much involved in movement, and dance is so much a part of me. But I do feel that, especially while I'm learning Auslan, it's definitely something that I'm learning. I still recognize now that I'm just nowhere near finished. And I think before I was like, I love sign language, and didn't recognize how expansive that would be. And now I really understand how much more I have to learn. So I feel that sign language is such a big part of my study, and it's such a big part of my passion. It is a part of my expression, but, you know, people that are actually a part of that very strong deaf community, some would see sign language as part of their identity. And that's probably something that I couldn't say, even though I am so inspired and I'm committed to learning, and I'm committed to continuing my study in that particular area. And I do recognize that Andy's love and passion for dance and movement is there too. And he has a lot to learn as well. We both do. So look, we've come a long way. We were both in the Rehearsey film that Greg had mentioned earlier. And so, you know, from where we started 10 years ago, everything's so different now, and we've both learned a lot, and I'm grateful for those experiences.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you to everyone that participated and sent those questions through. And of course, a massive thank you to you, Emma. It's been absolutely lovely speaking with you and getting to know you a little bit more, and about all the amazing work that you're doing. We really do appreciate your time. Congratulations again on being the UTS Young Alumni Award winner. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think that's where I come back in. Hi, Emma.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks, Gabby, for doing that. Emma, that check is in the mail, so you should get that early next week. The other joke I had was to remind me to get a reference from you at some stage, but yeah, we'll see. Hey, the thing about learning, you know how it was hardly learning because it was fun. That's the thing I love about what I do, is that it's, yeah, sure, we're learning stuff, but gee, it's fun to be doing that sort of stuff. Even when the boom pole comes in the shot, I'm glad it wasn't with us. That's the only thing.
No, I learnt my lesson before I got to you, which was good.
Yeah. I had a vague memory. Did you? You were Skyping in the class at one stage as well?
I wasn't able to do correspondence, and I spoke to you about my touring schedule. And this is what I mean about, I just want to thank you for being so flexible, because at that time I wasn't able to change my study pathway to be correspondence. And you were like, that's okay, we'll just Skype you in the class.
It's like we were in training for 2020.
Here
We're
we
like so forward thinking in 2012. Dear.
I was able to learn the whole lecture. I knew what I needed to do for the assignment, and so it made sense. And so, look, honestly, thank you.
Okay. Well, what I love about media arts and production is, one of the things I love is the acronym is MAP, and I love the fact all the pathways. And one of the strengths of humanities is that it opens up so many pathways for people to go on, and that's why I love that. It's a bit hokey, the whole idea of we're MAP and there's pathways, and you take those pathways with MAP. I need to close this session with a big thank you to you, Gabby, everyone involved with organising this. It's been tops. I haven't heard my name mentioned so much since I was in trouble with my mum, so that's great. Thank you. There are upcoming webinars. Oh, thank you to the audience for sticking around. There's a upcoming webinar Megan's about to share with Marv Shankar on the 15th of September, who's also an Alumni Award winner. And I just wanted to close today by saying, huzzah!
Huzzah!
Huzzah!